Okay, number 8 is Bioshock 2. Um, okay, so Bioshock 2. I think a lot of people were sort of skeptic about this game because they didn't think that Bioshock needed a sequel. And to a certain degree, they were probably right. I think Bioshock's a very self-contained game. It introduces you to this world of the city under the ocean, and it introduces you to the characters and its history, and then it comes full circle, comes to a nice conclusion, and I think the ending is a little rushed, and I think the last boss is a little lame in the first Bioshock. But I loved Bioshock. I absolutely adored it. It remains as one of my favorite 360 games and one of my favorite games ever. I think way back when I did the top 50 games, I think it came out at number 11. I don't remember though. It very well could have been 11. Um, so this game takes place 10 years after the events of the first game. You play Subject Delta, which is not the little sister. You play the Big Daddy, the first Big Daddy to ever be successfully bonded to a little sister, Subject Delta. And you wake up with, I'm assuming, amnesia, I think, but you have to find the little sister to which you've been bonded. And it sort of plays out like that. There's sort of a new head honcho in. There's a new head honcho in Rapture. Rapture has sort of a new dictator, except now it's like the opposite. Andrew Ryan from the first game was very much into the idea of the individualist. Um, being your own man. Shaping your own destiny, and how you can't do that. You can't reap your own rewards on the surface, but in Rapture you can. And the new antagonist, Sophia Lamb. Um, she is just the opposite. She says that people should be together, and together you can conquer what you want to conquer. And the storyline is okay. It's not as good as the first one. I mean, this game is basically like the very short description of it is not as good as the first one. I think the gameplay is still very fun though. I think now you can wield plasmids and guns at the same time. And being in the shoes of a Big Daddy is pretty cool. You still take a lot of damage though from splicers. You don't really feel too much like a Big Daddy until maybe the last 2 hours of the game when you get the best weapon. Then you really start tearing through people. There's really sort of a climactic final sequence where you're just fighting a bunch of dudes, and it's really awesome. And it's still fun, but I would just say that Rapture loses a little bit of its luster on the second time around. The game though is still very good. There's emphasis on gathering with the little sisters. You basically you have them get Adam for you from corpses, and that's very fun. I think that's the best, maybe one of the best new things about the game. You set up a perimeter and you let them harvest Adam, and then splicers start coming, and then you got to fend off the splicers. And the difficulty is pretty well balanced. It's not too hard. I mean, I think the Bioshock games have always been fairly easy. I think I beat Bioshock on hard without any difficulty whatsoever. I started Bioshock 2 on hard, but I never finished it because I'd sort of lost interest. But Bioshock 2, if you're a fan of the first game, you've probably already got this game. But if you are and you haven't, you need to check it out. I think it was a very valiant effort for a second game. Obviously, Ken Levine and Irrational Games, who did the first game, is not involved with this one. But they're doing Bioshock Infinite for 2012, which I'm so excited for. But Bioshock 2, it's an okay. It was an okay predecessor, but still a very good, not predecessor, successor, but a very good game, nonetheless. When compared to the first, it doesn't stand up too well. There's multiplayer I didn't check out at all. I figured that that'd be the kind of thing where people play it for like a week, and then they go back to the solid, tried and true online multiplayers, like your Call of Duties and your Halos. One thing I will say is that my second favorite moment in gaming of 2010 happened in this game. There's an amazing sequence, roughly 5/6 of the way through the game. An amazing sequence where you sort of see things from a different angle. Let me just say that. That's all I want to say. I don't want to give away anything else for those of you who don't know what happens yet. It is very cool. So I think if you just want to check that out, you'll know when it happens. I think that that's almost worth the entire $60 that you pay for. Although it's probably less now. But I love Bioshock, and I love Bioshock 2, and you should check it out. Okay, coming in at number 7 is Donkey Kong Country Returns for the Nintendo Wii. Let me just say, Retro Studios is awesome. They just know how to take a beloved franchise and breathe new life into it and make it fresh and fun and entertaining and new. And they did that perfectly with Donkey Kong Country Returns. I'm not sure that a rehashing of the Donkey Kong Country series could be done any better than Retro did with this game. I think it is. I mean, it just feels like the fourth in the Donkey Kong Country series. You know, if you have Donkey Kong Country 1, 2, and 3, I think that this game could just basically be called Donkey Kong Country 4. It feels that seamless and that well done. Retro Studios, for those of you who don't know, was also behind the Metroid Prime trilogy, and boy, they just did. I mean, they just know how to take a franchise that people love and make it amazing. So the storyline, there's nothing really much of a storyline. I don't really feel like talking about that. And there's no Kremlings in this game because that is Rare's property, and Rare and Nintendo have sort of split ways, so to speak. But I think, I didn't miss them for a second. There's these tiki enemies now, and there's these, they brainwash animals, so there's still some generic animals you fight, but the main enemy, I guess, are these like tikis that all look like instruments. Like most of them look like bongo drums, but some of them look like guitars or pipes or something. And I didn't miss Kremlings for a second. I really did not. That is a very small fraction of the Donkey Kong Country universe, in my opinion. The game that the area that this game really stands out in, though, is the level design. They made some awesome level design. I'm trying to remember some levels right now. There's one that's like silhouettes, that's really, really cool. It's like a sunset, and everything in the foreground is silhouettes, and I think that was a really neat idea. There's one where you're like blasting around on pirate ships, so that's really cool. There's one where there's this giant octopus attacking you the entire time, and you have to avoid his tentacles. There's basically an entire world, boss included, that's like a minecart world, and you'd think that would wear a little thin, and it's a little hard. That's probably one of the harder worlds in the game. But it's very, very creative. And I think it's an inspired work. I think they really wanted to do the Donkey Kong Country franchise justice, and they did it tenfold. There's all those things, that you can collect. There's the Kong letters again, and there are also these puzzle pieces. Basically, if you're one of those crazy completionists like myself, you'll be playing each level 2 to 3 times in order to get everything to 100% it, and then you can do time trials, and then there are these bonus levels you get, and the game is just really nice and big, and you can sink a lot of hours into it. I'll say the difficulty is pretty substantial. It's not too forgiving, especially in the later levels, but I always had a lot of lives, so I never felt too pressured. I never felt like it was so unfair that I was, ready to chuck my Wiimote through the screen. It was never that bad, but it is pretty difficult. I'm glad it doesn't hold your hand, because that wouldn't be as good. Because the Donkey Kong Country games are also kind of hard when you get right down to it. So, Retro Studios, kudos to you. You make awesome games. Check out Donkey Kong Country Returns. Coming in at number 6, lower than I thought it would be, is God of War 3 for the PS3. What a way to end the trilogy, man. I love the God of War series. For those of you who remember my top 50, God of War 1 and 2 I sort of put together. I sort of cheated and put them together as one game that was fairly high on the list. Because they're both so good, I couldn't decide between the two. And God of War 3 is the best of the trilogy, hands down. It looks gorgeous. That is to say, it looks horribly gorgeous. There are some really messed up things. Like, just the first boss fight, I feel like the first boss fight, they wanted to really show what they could do. Like, Poseidon is like this huge, water, there's these huge water horses that he rides on, and he's like this huge beast that is just amazing. And you feel like I'm just going to say, you feel like a badass, okay? You're taking down, god after god in this game. You're taking down Poseidon, you're taking down Hades, you're taking down so many. You take down a Titan, I mean, that's really cool. And basically, I think where this game succeeds, where others didn't, where the other two didn't, is that it's more than just the Blades of Chaos. The Blades of Chaos are fun, and they've always been the core gameplay of the series. But I think where the other ones failed is that their alternate weapons weren't any great shakes. I thought the Sword of Artemis in the second one was kind of, in the first one was kind of lame. Trying to remember some of the, oh, they had the hammer in the second game. I didn't really use very much. In this game, there's 4 weapons, and they're all very fun to use and very good. You get this Nemesis whip that you can whip around, and the Claws of Hades. And my personal favorite are these big, like lion gauntlets called the Nemean Cestus, which you can do serious, brutal damage with, and you can switch between them almost seamlessly. And I think that's what really makes the combat better in this game than the others. And the God of War games have always been praised for their combat. And every game since, every third-person action game since, with similar combat, has been called like God of War. They weren't the first ones to do it, but I think they were the first ones to do it right, and people have taken leaves out of their book for good reasons. And for a series where there's been a different sort of lead creative director, every time. First it was David Jaffe, and now it was, and then I don't know the other two. But for someone where it switches every time, they just get it right every time, and they seem to top themselves every single time. And God of War 3, in addition to being very fun, the story is sort of flat. I think it's lost a little bit of its air. Again, you're just kind of insanely taking revenge. And Kratos is a little bit less of a compelling character nowadays than I would maybe originally hope for. But he's just going nuts and taking down people. And it ends with, like, the coolest punch, like, literal punch in video game history. Hands down. It sort of leaves it closed. I don't think they're going to make a God of War 4. I don't think they should. I think they should stop and move on to a new thing. But for those of you who played the first 2 God of War games, you probably already have this. If you haven't, you really should check it out. I think the God of War series is the preeminent example of how action-adventure games should be done right, and it's probably one of gaming's best trilogies. So, God of War 3.